The best comedy movies of 2020. If there was ever a year that needed some good laughs, it's 2020. Times are tough. We've all had an unusual amount of alone time this year, and there's nothing like a good guffaw to burn off a little stress and make you feel primally connected to something. Fortunately, while many of the year's biggest blockbusters and highly anticipated horror titles were delayed, a lot of high-profile comedy movies made their way to streaming and DVD, giving us something to laugh about at home. Like everything else in 2020, it's been an interesting and unusual year in comedy. There's a whole lot of genre-bending. Comedies that skew towards drama, action comedies, horror comedies, and animated funny movies for kids. And then there's that Will Ferrell movie that made us cry like babies. A strange year indeed. We sorted through 2020's comedy releases, from the streaming hits to the straight-to-VOD surprises, and the few that had the chance to screen in theaters, and picked our favorites. 12-Hour Shift. If you like your comedy a bit twisted and very bloody, settle in for a super fun thriller with Brie Grant's 12-Hour Shift. Set in a hospital during one very gnarly, unrelenting shift. The film stars Angela Bettis as a nurse whose black market organ-selling scheme goes way off track when her not-too-bright but extremely determined cousin, Chloe Farnworth, loses a harvested kidney. Grant has snappy dialogue and a sharp eye, especially in one dance-fueled scene transition that truly delighted me, but as an experienced actor herself, she's especially keen at getting killer performances out of her cast. Bettis is reliably excellent in the lead, and David Arquette charms his way through his minimal scenes. But Farnworth is a dang force of nature as an unstoppable dimwit who will do whatever it takes to save her own dolled-up skin, no matter how dastardly. It's the kind of genre bender that will have you cringing through the comedy and smiling through the squirmiest bits. An American Pickle. As a longtime fan of Seth Rogen, An American Pickle didn't have to sell me too hard on watching it earlier this year when it dropped onto HBO Max. Penned by Simon Rich, who also wrote the short story on which his script is based, An American Pickle follows Herschel Greenbaum Rogen, an immigrant working in a pickle factory who accidentally gets sealed up into a vat of pickle brine in the early 20th century and is released from his salty tomb 100 years later into modern day Brooklyn. Herschel's only surviving relative is Ben, also Rogen, an app developer who welcomes Herschel into his home. As the two reconnect, their very different approaches to life get them into some very odd situations, including Herschel's spectacularly failed attempt to start his own pickle business. Cue Herschel learning what an intern is, what a health inspector is, and what wokeness is with a 20th century attitude. Things get very silly very fast as Ben reacts poorly to Herschel's new life, leading them both to confront their own issues around loss and loneliness. Much of American Pickle's comedy is infused with earnestness and sweetness rooted in the idea that families are stronger together, so when it falls apart, it can lead to places that are as amusingly absurd as they are enlightening. Bad Boys for Life. The most endearing element of the Bad Boys movies isn't the over-the-top action and wild-as-all-hell set-pieces, but rather the charisma and comedic banter of its two lead actors. Even after a 17-year hiatus, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence easily reconnect with that magic in Bad Boys for Life, delivering a movie that's equal parts hilarious and high-octane. The movie leans into the fact that these two guys are well into middle age, although looking at Smith, you'd never be able to tell, resulting in some truly delightful gags that are closer to the near-farcical comedy of the first film. One particularly memorable scene involves Mike Smith trying to stealthily drop off Marcus Lawrence's baby grandchild before pushing Marcus into a high-speed chase in the Burnett family minivan. There's also several Easter eggs for fans of the series that produce some solid laughs, in particular the film's masterful opening sequence. Bad Boys for Life manages to be one of the year's best comedies without slimming down the action one iota, which is another way of saying you should watch it immediately. The only bummer is that it's a cop movie, with one scene in particular that has aged horribly since its release back in January. So maybe just pretend that they're superheroes? Bad Education. Hugh Jackman turned in one of the strongest performances of 2020 in Bad Education, a dramedy based on one of the biggest embezzlement cases in U.S. history. Jackman plays Frank Tassoni, a Long Island superintendent who is the model leader with an unblemished record. Frank's carefully constructed veneer of perfection begins to crack when it is revealed his close friend, Assistant Superintendent Pam Gluckian, Allison Janney, is revealed to have been using school district funds for her own personal gain. Pam's downfall begins to expose just how long and deep her deception has gone and Frank's participation in this crime. Bad Education is not a comedy in that it explicitly aims for laughs. However, you will find yourself laughing at the characters of Bad Education because those on both the right and wrong side of history are depicted through Mike Makowski's script and Corey Finley's direction. Bad Education is a comedy steeped in dark, dry humor that helps increase the tension as the plot moves forward while exposing its blandly callous antagonists. Bill and Ted Face the Music. One of the brightest spots of 2020 was Bill and Ted Face the Music. In an otherwise very bleak year, the third movie in the Bill and Ted franchise gave us a shot of joy. Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter return for the threequel after nearly 30 years away, once again playing our favorite San Dimas time travelers nearly 30 years after 1991 seconds Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Bill and Ted Face the Music makes very smart and interesting choices with its story. The movie brings us into the present day, where Bill Winter and Ted Reeves are still living in San Dimas and still trying to make the song that will apparently unite the world. While they're still musicians and best friends, they're also dads and husbands, so the pressures of life weigh even heavier on them. They're also still very codependent on one another, a running joke that often results in some of the funniest moments of the movie. Bill and Ted Face the Music sees the guys trying to save the world once more. This time, they try to steal their world-saving song from themselves. As they bop around on their own timelines, they meet multiple Bills and Teds, some who are in jail, some who are failed rock stars, and some who are hanging out in a nursing home together. This setup allows Reeves and Winter to really play around and indulge in the go-offness, making for a very fun and heartwarming romp. Birds of Prey, and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn. In the year 2020, it's not hard to make the best DCEU film thus far. But Birds of Prey accomplishes this task with unparalleled, unprecedented flair. It backflips over the DCEU finish line with glitter bombs and double middle fingers up. It redefines how much authors can and should flex in mainstream superhero cinema. Kathy Yan is doing everything, and I love every second of it. It gives Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn her necessary emancipation and then some. Watching Robbie inhabit this role without any icky need to pacify the male gaze is a goddamn joy. Its action sequences, with assists from John Wick's Chad Stahelski, are pounding, fluid, brutal, clear pieces of poetry. Its comedy bits are committed to, hard. Nothing has made me laugh harder than Quinn's love and desire for a breakfast sandwich. It reminds us that Mary Elizabeth Winstead is a powerhouse comedian, Ewan McGregor and Chris Messina are powerhouse villains, and Rosie Perez is a powerhouse, period. It is, sincerely, one of the wildest mainstream action comedy films I've ever seen in a movie theater released by a major studio. And I look forward to revisiting it as the fearlessly alive pop art object it is for years to come. Borat's subsequent movie film. If you haven't seen Borat's subsequent movie film yet, you've definitely heard about it. Sacha Baron Cohen's surprise revival of his 2006 character pop culture phenomenon made headlines for all kinds of reasons, from the right-wing rally prank spotted earlier this year to the shameful display from Rudy Giuliani that became a bona fide political talking point. But the sequel isn't just another satirical skewering of America's political hypocrisy. It's a surprisingly tender reminder of the humanity behind the partisan hate. Where Bharat sought to expose the vile beliefs that belied illusions of decency, the sequel looks to highlight the shared bit of vulnerability behind the now explicit hatred that dominates our discourse, and of course, make us laugh. Cohen is unsurprisingly fearless and hilarious in his return to form, but arguably the breakout of the year is Maria Bakalova, who stars as Bharat's daughter and steals the show, going toe-to-toe with Cohen for every outrageous gag, and anchoring the film in her character's journey to independence. So yes, Bharat's subsequent movie film is surprisingly touching, but also the hardest I've laughed out loud in quite a while, and all these years later, you still can't help but marvel at just how far Cohen, and now, Bakalova along with him, is willing to go for the bit. Downhill. Downhill doesn't quite measure up to its Swedish predecessor Force Majeure, but it's a solid film in its own right that deserves to be seen. Fox Searchlight's remake from the way back directors Jim Rash and Nat Faxon boasts some serious star power between Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. The duo play a longtime couple whose marriage is put to the test by a harmless avalanche. As a wall of snow descends upon their family, Ferrell makes a split-second decision to grab his phone and run, abandoning his wife and children in the process. He argues that his survival instinct simply kicked in, but she's having none of it, and the rest of their vacation suffers from the resulting fallout. Miranda Otto co-stars as a randy hotel concierge who is very open and honest about her busy sex life. Ferrell is somewhat miscast here, but Louis-Dreyfus does wonders with the role, and truly deserves a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical. It's a treat whenever she graces the big screen, and her comic timing here is as impeccable as always. Emma, the most recent take on Jane Austen's Emma, is perhaps the most sumptuous and salty entry into the canon of movie adaptations based on the beloved author's work. Screenwriter Eleanor Catton takes care to preserve the more biting tones of Austen's wits in this version of the Emma tale, while director Autumn B. Wilde and her crew craft a vision of Regency-era England which borders on pure confectionery delight. These two elements serve as the perfect stage for Emma's pitch-perfect cast, led by Anya Taylor-Joy as the titular wannabe matchmaker, to play out the dramas within a small town. Unlike previous Emma adaptations starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Romola Garai respectively, or even the uber-popular modern take Clueless, D. Wilde's Emma brings out the darker, more searing aspects of Austen's story. Taylor-Joy's Emma is a bit more overtly conniving in her schemes to push together two unsuspecting potential lovers, with those efforts making the pain more acutely felt when it all goes awry. But for every sour, there is plenty of sweet, which comes in the form of dry, pointed comedy. You need look no further than Josh O'Connor as the insufferable vicar Mr. Elton, always prone to a bit of self-important monologuing, or Emma's down-the-nose stares which blatantly communicate her dislike of a particular person or comment, or moments of more physical comedy like a chuckle-worthy pianoforte duel, all of which bring out the funnier side of Emma. Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga isn't like any classic Will Ferrell film. Nor is it like Wedding Crashers, the last Ferrell-Rachel McAdams joint from the same director, David Dobkin. If it can be compared to any other Ferrell comedy, the closest I can come up with is Stranger Than Fiction with a seasoning of Blades of Glory. I'm not even sure if it's interested in being a comedy the way any other comedy is. It plays more like an inspirational sports drama that happens to use wigs, elves, European accents, and theatrical songs to convey its earnest messaging. Its heart is fully, unabashedly, designedly on its sleeve. The big climactic set piece is a performance of a gorgeous ballad with barely any jokes. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Eurovision is a wholly unique experience, one that made me feel and made me cry throughout. The tagline says it all, nobody wins solo. Extraordinary. Extraordinary might just be the sweetest movie of 2020, and this odd little horror comedy is never quite what you expect. Completely charming, laugh-out-loud funny, and occasionally quite creepy. Extraordinary is a ghost-busting good time that lovingly embraces the hallmarks of the haunting genre and repackages them as a rom-com. Directed by Micah Hearn and Enda Loughman, the Irish indie stars Maeve Higgins as Rose Dooley, a gentle and kind, if a bit lonely, woman who happens to have powerful and sometimes terrible paranormal gifts. Usually, that leads her to some pretty quotidian ghosts who just need a little help passing over. But all that changes when she takes a gig helping a local man named Martin Barry Ward get rid of his angry deceased wife's spirit, and the sinister has-been rock star Christian Winter Will Forte rolls into town with a devilish plan to find his way to new glory. Higgins and Ward make for a positively delightful duo, and their chemistry eases you right into Extraordinary's joyful oddball romance meets exorcism riff. Freaky. Arguably the best horror comedy since the original Scream. Freaky is a bloody body-swapping comedy wherein an awkward teenage girl, Catherine Newton, trades places with that of a hulking serial killer, Vince Vaughn. This unholy mashup of Friday the 13th and Freaky Friday, hence the legally clearable title, shouldn't work, but it does, spectacularly, thanks largely to the two committed, wholly believable, and often laugh-out-loud funny lead performances and a whip-smart script by director Christopher Landon and Michael Kennedy, which thoughtfully embraces modern-day sensitivities, pronouns, while still delivering the gore-drenched goods. The bisection of a mercurial shop teacher played by high school movie legend Alan Ruck is particularly satisfying. As he did with Happy Death Day to You, Landon also makes room for some wonderfully emotional moments, proving that if you're going to make a movie this obsessed with pumping blood, you're going to need a beating heart too. Underseen during its initial drive-in theatrical run in November, Freaky is already available to rent on VOD and should have its cult classic status cemented immediately. It's that good. The Gentleman. Guy Ritchie has never been one to pussyfoot around, and neither am I, so I'll give it to you straight. The C-word is used a lot in this testosterone-driven flick. It's a vulgar term that's even more unbecoming when you consider the film's title, but if you can get past that popular British slang word and a bunch of other offensive stuff too, to be sure, you'll see that Ritchie really is an equal opportunity offender, and no one gets off easy in The Gentleman. Matthew McConaughey plays a major weed dealer who is looking to cash out and sell his operation to the highest bidder. Charlie Hunnam plays his right-hand man, one who's forced to deal with a nosy reporter, a hilarious Hugh Grant who comes snooping around, while McConaughey fends off a power-hungry gangster played by Henry Golding. The film co-stars Colin Farrell in a scene-stealing turn as a boxing coach who has taught his fighters how to use their unique athletic skills outside of the ring. The Gentleman may not be a crime comedy on par with Ritchie's early films Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, but it'll satisfy fans of those films with its clever twists and turns. Just don't say we didn't warn you about the potty myth on this movie. Happiest season. Fair warning, Happiest season is a bit heavier and a lot more emotional than a lot of folks were expecting when they hit play. But that's part of what makes Clea Duvall's Christmas dramedy worth watching. Kristen Stewart stars as Abby, a gay woman who wants to propose to her girlfriend Harper Mackenzie Davis at her family's big Christmas gathering. There's just one problem: Harper's family doesn't know she's gay, leading to a classic rom-com setup of farcical false identities and secret trysts. Except they play a bit different here, because Happiest Season marks a long overdue chapter in queer representation as the first gay Christmas rom-com. That meant that Happiest Season had a lot of weight on its shoulders that your average holiday romp doesn't have to carry. And the conversations the film sparked only proved how hungry people are for that representation. And the film's conspicuous absence in Hulu's presentation at the 2020 Disney Investor Day, despite the fact that it reportedly shattered Hulu's viewership records for Hulu originals, only shows how far we still have left to go. But whether you're Team Harper or Team Riley, Aubrey Plaza in a film-stealing supporting role. Happiest Season is a heartfelt romantic dramedy with a fantastic comedic cast. Now I just need a spin-off sequel that's all about Mary Holland and Dan Levy's characters being the best. Hubby Halloween. Adam Sandler's Netflix output has, by and large, been largely underwhelming. But Hubby Halloween, his first Halloween-themed movie for the streamer and his first, since the underrated supernatural comedy Little Nicky, was surprisingly successful. A warm-hearted, low-stakes romp, more trick than treat. Sandler plays the title character, a resident of Salem, Massachusetts who loves Halloween despite being scared of just about everything. On this Halloween, though, there might just be something to be frightened of. A series of mysterious kidnappings leads to a number of suspects including an escaped lunatic and, possibly, a werewolf. Stacked with Sandler's usual supporting cast of regular all-stars, including Kevin James, Steve Buscemi, Tim Meadows, Maya Rudolph and Rob Schneider, and some notable new additions to the team: Julie Bowen, Ray Liotta, a scene-stealing June Squibb. Hubby Halloween meanders but never feels lost, with a number of wonderful character bits and recurring gags, like a weird runabout women dressing like Harley Quinn. Who knows? This could wind up an annual favorite, like a PG-13, piss-joke-filled version of It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. The Hunt. Nothing will prepare you for The Hunt, and that's a good thing. After an unfortunate shelving back in 2019, The Hunt was finally released in early 2020 to a very curious public. What was all the fuss about? Why was it shuttered away? Was it really the shocking, politically polarizing movie it was marketed as and which earned it that unusual shelving away? Welp, no, not really. Look, The Hunt makes it clear in plain fucking English that both liberals and conservatives are in its crosshairs and takes every opportunity to mercilessly mock the behavior of both sides. But that is both the point and not quite the point of this Craig Zobel, Nick Kuss and Damon Lindelof-penned comedy starring Betty Gilpin. The Hunt begins with a seemingly disparate group of people drugged and tossed in the middle of a forest. Upon waking, the group discovers they share a common thread. They represent the portion of the American populace that clings to the kind of insidious ignorance which another portion of the populace believes is ruining the country. From there, a ham-fisted rendition of the most dangerous game ensues, with the mysterious Crystal Gilpin breaking away from the pack to figure out what the hell is going on. Crystal's search for answers leads to some big surprises. It also allows her to showcase a very unusual set of skills, which might put her up next to John Wick as one of the best action heroes in recent memory. Through Crystal's arc, The Hunt delivers its most brutal and shocking plot twists. Along the way, Gilpin brings her full range as a comedic actor to the table, nailing some tricky line delivery that toes the line between absurd and black comedy. The movie's plot twists, as well as some genuinely laugh-out-loud moments, keep your eyes peeled for a very good sequence set in a bunker, help argue The Hunt's thesis that, honestly, we might be well and truly fucked here in the good old US of A, because whatever is going on right now just ain't working. The King of Staten Island. While The King of Staten Island really is more of a drama than a comedy, A, it's a Judd Apatow movie, and B, it's still classified as a comedy, so we're saying it counts for the purposes of this list. And it's a good movie. Pete Davidson pulls from his own personal life to chronicle the story of a directionless young man aimlessly wandering about Staten Island, wondering if he'll ever make it out. The comedy comes mostly from Davidson's dark humor with regards to his father's death and his interactions with his friends. But the film makes clear that the humor masks a deep pain and grief that he keeps avoiding at all costs. It's Apatow's most ambitiously dramatic and emotional film yet, while also maintaining an overwhelming sense of humanity through humor. Love and Monsters. Well, this one came out of nowhere. Love and Monsters was one of a host of genre movies Paramount quietly shuffled to VOD when it was very clear that theaters wouldn't be open in time. See also. spontaneous spell, and it was a huge surprise in a very good way. In the future, an asteroid threatens to wipe out the Earth. When the asteroid is destroyed, the chemical fallout turns all of the cold-blooded creatures on Earth into huge, hideous mutated monsters. Dylan O'Brien plays a survivor who sets out to connect with his long-separated, socially distanced love, traversing a world that threatens to gobble him up at every turn. Visually sophisticated with a surprising amount of heart, Love and Monsters ventures into some unexpected territory, including a tender relationship between O'Brien's character and a stray dog. Supposedly the two loved each other in real life, and a Twilight Zone-y twist that, wouldn't you know it, humans were the real monsters? With winning supporting performances by Michael Rooker as a jaded wanderer and a very adorable Jessica Henwick as O'Brien's paramour, Love and Monsters is very much worth seeking out. On the Rocks. At least 2020 gave us a new Sofia Coppola movie. The weirdly overlooked On the Rocks, part of A24's partnership with Apple TV+, is a fine, effervescent return to form for Coppola, whose last film was the darkly hued, but still quite funny, female revenge film The Beguiled. In On the Rocks, Rashida Jones plays a creatively stunted writer who suspects that her husband, Marlon Wayans, might be cheating on her, leading her to team up with her rascally father, Bill Murray, to try and get some answers. Light-hearted, full of unabashedly delightful performances and ensconced in the velvety, extremely wealthy version of New York City that only someone like Coppola could adequately portray. It oscillates between frivolity and deep pathos with ease. In fact, it's the interludes where Jones is obsessed with the vitality of her creative life that you feel Coppola reaching for an autobiographical truth that just so happens to be nestled inside an airy screwball comedy, featuring a terrific score by French pop band Phoenix, led by Coppola's husband, that is, damnably, still unavailable, and lush cinematography by Philippe Lessard. On the Rocks is a truly unsung gem. Onward, Pixar's first original film since 2017 Coco. Yes, seriously, Onward is Pixar at their most imaginative and heart-tugging. Based, in part, on the childhood of co-writer-director Dan Scanlon, Onward tells the tale of two elf brothers, Q refugees Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, who live in a mundanely magical realm and who embark on an epic quest to spend another day with their dearly departed father. This is an undeniably clever contraption. Seeing how Scanlon and a small army of talented artists, technicians, and storytellers conjure a world that is at once suburban and super fantastical is a feat in and of itself. We want a pet dragon. But that Pixar difference, of course, is the intricateness of that storytelling and the way that they are able to inject real emotion into something that, in the wrong hands, could have been a purely intellectual exercise. It's also one of the studio's funniest films, with a centerpiece sequence set at a mythical Beasts chain restaurant that will leave you howling with laughter. It might have gotten the short end of the stick with its theatrical run, but Onward, which plays and looks a lot like the Pixar version of an Amblin movie, is on Disney Plus now. If you haven't seen it yet, do it now. It is an epic quest very much worth embarking on. Palm Springs. Such a confident, assured, bold, and tight debut film. Palm Springs speaks to all of us in this current moment, so rife as a breeding ground for empty-calorie cynicism, and shows us why caring is richer, more fun, and even cooler. Andy Samberg devastates the picture as an origami folding of his typical persona. His cool puppy dog shenanigans weaponized in on itself in nihilistic self-loathing masked in an aloha shirt. Kristen Milioti gives award-worthy work, nailing her comedic lines with casual confidence, shifting toward modes of anger and depression seamlessly, and acting as the film's beating, submerged heart. Watching these two realize they need each other is a simple joy that happens to be couched in a not-so-simple time loop sci-fi plot. If you thought Groundhog Day got dark, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's crammed with jokes, It's so empathetic and relatable, and it will make you feel alive. Plus, J.K. Simmons with a crossbow. Come on. Save yourselves. If you're looking for a cute and cuddly romantic comedy with a sci-fi flourish, make sure you don't miss Save Yourselves. Written and directed by real-life couple Alex Huston Fisher and Eleanor Wilson, the film is infused with tangible warmth and affection. Starring Sunita Mani and John Reynolds as a peak millennial couple. Read. No survival skills. Who decide to go off-grid for a tech-free weekend and wind up missing an entire alien invasion until it interrupts their getaway. Save yourselves. Take a while to get going. But once the couple realizes what's up, and once the deceptively adorable alien puffs start showing off just how deadly they can be, the film becomes a thrilling sci-fi survival story that's also a capsule of relationships and communication. This one also has some weirdly prescient moments, from its fixation on sortie starters to the sentiment of isolation, that felt extra cathartic in 2020. Scoob! Was meant to dust off the beloved Hanna-Barbera franchise for a new audience. It had a hip voice cast, including Zac Efron, Amanda Seyfried, Gina Rodriguez and Mark Wahlberg, and seemed to be channeling that Lego movie Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse sweet spot of mixing disparate influences and pop culture references, from within the Hanna-Barbera universe and without, with honest-to-goodness emotion for a single intoxicating family fun stew. But when COVID-19 hit, all hell broke loose, and Scoob, a sweet but not overtly sentimental reinvention, debuted exclusively on VOD. That isn't to take away anything from the actual film, which is fun and sprightly, bringing the characters to a new generation, while essentially maintaining what made them so much fun in the first place. Will Forte's Shaggy is a standout, complete with handsome animation courtesy of the Texas-based RealFX and some unexpected surprises. Scoob didn't reinvent the Scooby snack, but it did offer plenty of oversized action and belly laughs for disciples of the franchise and those who are new to the property. Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm a huge stinkin' fan of Sonic the Hedgehog. I wanted, in my bones, for its movie adaptation to be good. I shuddered at the teeth trailer, I breathed easier when his design was changed, I wondered about the bad precedent set by fans bullying studios into changing directors' visions. And then, I finally saw the damn thing. And I found it to be a damn delight. You can tell the filmmakers have a genuine love for Sonic. The fast little blue creature running around with the physical and emotional energy of a precocious 10-year-old who just drank Surge, aka perfect. Ben Schwartz nails the role and burns him, pitching his voice just so to capture the hedgehog's devil-may-care attitude, while also nailing the emotional heart of the film, which is to say, Sonic cares a lot, and I cared about him a lot, and I just want him to have friends and be happy. The road trip chase structure of the picture, pairing Schwartz's Sonic with James Marsden as Psy-Cop with a heart of gold, is helpful to making sure the film stays fundamentally competent, giving it simple bones to put the fun stuff atop. As for Jim Carrey, playing the iconic villain Dr. Robotnik, what a joy! What a pleasure! What delicious, show-offy, splendidly comedic acting. Carrey's specific line readings are just a little off in ways that destroyed me. He is a damn pro, working that screen. He's wonderful as a villain, turning the screws to be menacing when he needs to. My goodness, what a performance. Sonic the Hedgehog is a dang fun piece of family entertainment and a worthy addition to the canon, and its post-credits character cameo has me clamoring for a sequel. Spontaneous. Technically, spontaneous combustion isn't funny. But a movie about spontaneously combusting teens starring Katherine Langford and Charlie Plummer as two of those teens frequently caught in the crossfire. Yeah, there's some comedy in that. Adapted from Aaron Starmer's novel of the same name, Spontaneous blends the traditional coming-of-age emotional arc with the very visceral experience of spontaneous combustion. We follow high schooler Mara Carlisle Langford, A jaded teen who often uses her cooler-than-cool exterior to keep herself at a distance from her peers. That boundary begins to dissolve quickly when students at her school begin to spontaneously combust at random times, during attendance, at a football game, even at a house party. Mara and her friends soon face a complex tangle of emotions as they try to maintain some semblance of the lives they used to lead while moving throughout their day, wondering if they will also just explode into a puddle of viscera with no clear reason given for why it is happening to them. Spontaneous never wastes the opportunity to hammer home its message that crazy shit can happen to you at any point in your life, so live it to the fullest. This offers plenty of chances for the story to slow down and hit some poignant notes. But in between those poignant moments, Spontaneous offers some dark comedy to sink your teeth into through Mara's reactions to the absolute madness unfolding around her. Growing up is never easy, but when something so surreal is going on that you have no choice but to literally duck and cover, sometimes laughter is the only option. Stargirl, a wistful Disney Plus feature based on a fairly beloved novel by Jerry Spinelli, is one of the year's biggest, and very best, surprises. Tenderly directed by the great Julia Hart. If you haven't seen Fast Color, do it now. It winningly combines elements of the teen comedy, jukebox musical, and classic melodrama into something altogether intoxicating and lovely. Grace VanderWaal plays Stargirl, a new student at a drab New Mexico high school, who ignites everyone's appreciation of the offbeat and who falls for a repressed square, Graham Vercare. It's easy to be cynical about Stargirl, both the movie and the character. With her manic pixie dream girl cutesiness, she wins the hearts of her classmates by singing a cover of the Beach Boys' True to Your School, with the lyrics modified for our more enlightened times. But that is part of the movie's message, that you can't judge a book by the cover, and that we're all more complicated and messy underneath. It's a nice message, especially since it's aimed at a younger audience on Disney's hugely popular streaming platform. But the movie still has some grit, and will make you laugh no matter what age you are. The Trip to Greece. When it comes to franchises, it could be said that anything past the second installment has to work overtime to justify its place in said franchise. When it comes to The Trip to Greece, the fourth movie in the trip, Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, no justification is needed. It's simply delightful and engaging right from the get-go. Directed by Michael Winterbottom once more, the conceit of The Trip to Greece is, by and large, unchanged. Coogan and Brydon come together to play fictionalized versions of themselves as they journey to a new country to do a bit of sightseeing, occasionally stopping in some of the best restaurants the country has to offer to sample the local flavors. The Trip to Greece doesn't disappoint when it comes to both hunger-inducing dishes, exquisite scenery, and rollicking good banter between Coogan and Brydon. By this point in the franchise, fans should be familiar enough with the duo's tendency to go long on bits and commit fully to impersonations to accept that scenes run a bit longer than usual. As the pair go around Greece retracing Odysseus' journey in the Odyssey, some of the most memorable, laugh-inducing scenes see two turning Hercules into Arnold Schwarzenegger and confusing Greece for Greece. Incredible stuff, really. Trolls World Tour. A highly anticipated sequel to the unexpectedly delightful 2016 DreamWorks animation Trolls, Trolls World Tour doubled down on its handmade arts and crafts style and upped musicality to become one of 2020's more charming animated comedies. This time around, the Trolls, led by Anna Kendrick and Justin Timberlake, discover that there are other troll kingdoms, each adhering to a specific style of music, and have to travel the land trying to stop an evil rock and roll troll, Rachel Bloom, from turning everyone into heavy metal zombies or something. It really doesn't matter much. The cut-and-paste style animation, which approximates everything from cardboard cutouts to felt to creatures made out of glitter, is some of the most jaw-dropping work DreamWorks Animation has ever done, and the script, which flits between musical genres and their accompanying realms, is smart and heartfelt. unfairly maligned at its time of release, perhaps because of the ominousness that its debut on home video carried. Trolls World Tour is a certifiable hoot, a sequin-dappled blast in these incredibly dark times. And, come on, that soundtrack is bursting with killer jams. Unpregnant. With the release of Wonder Woman 1984 on Christmas, I expect many folks will be checking out HBO Max later this month, and while you're there I highly recommend the original comedy drama Unpregnant. Directed and co-written by Rachel Lee Goldenberg and based on the book of the same name. The film stars Haley Lou Richardson as a do-gooder high school student named Veronica who's on the verge of starting her young adult life when she discovers she's pregnant. She decides to get an abortion, but that's illegal in the state of Missouri without her parents' consent. So she enlists her former BFF Bailey, played by Barbie Ferreira, to drive her to the nearest clinic, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Along the way the two resurrect a friendship that puttered out years ago, while also confronting the fears, frustration, and sadness that accompany Veronica's decision. It's a sweet, charming, and funny film that also does a great job of treating its characters and subject matter with the respect they deserve. This one might surprise you. The Witches. In a weird way The Witches now feels like the opening salvo of Warner Bros. Actually, it's just going to be on HBO Max, initiative that will soon dominate 2021. An adaptation of the classic Roald Dahl story and a pseudo-remake of Nicholas Roeg's miraculous 1990 version. This new version of The Witches was helmed by Back to the Future filmmaker Robert Zemeckis. And, truthfully, this feels like the most classically Zemeckis movie in a very long time. Full of his usual technological envelope pushing. In this case many of the characters are computer-animated mice, and he does some genuinely thrilling things with the camera starting up at human level and descending, careening to the size of the mice, and an emphasis on complicated, emotionally thrilling set pieces. Anne Hathaway goes big as the lead witch, who is organizing her fellow witches in a plot to rid the world of children. The World War II-era overtones loom large. While Octavia Spencer plays the grandmother of one of the transformed children, Stanley Tucci puts in fine work in a thankless role as the beleaguered hotel manager where all of this magical nonsense is taking place, full of zippy energy and eye-popping visual effects. The Witches was aimed at